Hello and welcome everyone. This is a screencast-o-matic recording for the part of the sociology lesson on debating Christopher Columbus and the experience of Native Americans. Before I get started, please let me encourage you to open up to the correct part for today's lesson, and remember to please answer the key concept questions as they appear. The whole reason why we're doing this for part of the lesson, just for clarity here, is because I think it's important to look at culture from a standpoint of trying to identify if there's any aspects and means that could use modification and or revision as far as our practices and viewpoints from a modern day contemporary perspective. Different cultures steal the limelight when it comes to education and common curriculum. However, what can be said about the Native American experience in today's point of view? Let's go ahead and explore this reading to find out more and to find out why this is a worthy debate. The debate over Columbus. Christopher Columbus's journey to the New World transformed the globe, but 525 years later, many Americans are now taking a hard look at his legacy. Probably no single journey changed the world more profoundly than that of Christopher Columbus. For hundreds of years, his story was the stuff of legend. How the Italian navigator sailed west from Spain in 1492, braved uncharted seas, and discovered America. The founders of the United States often cited Columbus as an inspiration for their experiment of a nation dedicated to the idea of freedom. In fact, the young country was often referred to as Columbia in honor of the explorer. And generations of Americans have celebrated him on the second Monday in October, Columbus Day. But today, many Americans are questioning Columbus's legacy. The explorer couldn't discover a place where millions of people already lived, and they say, worse, honoring him ignores how he, and the waves of European settlers who arrived in his wake, forced the indigenous peoples of the Americas off their land. To Professor Leo Kilsbeck of Arizona State University, Columbus Day is not a time of celebration, but a reminder of historic crimes against Native Americans. This point of view has inspired a growing trend. Last year, Boulder, Colorado voted to transform Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day. The day should not be about people who came, but about people who were already here, says Mayor Suzanne Jones. More than 30 other cities and states of South Dakota and Alaska have similar celebrations, and some continue to observe Columbus Day as well. The Columbus controversy reminds us that history is messy. But according to Charles C. Mann, a journalist and author of books 1491 and 1493, Columbus's contact with America so revolutionized the ecologies, economies, and political systems of Europe, Asia, and Africa that Columbus Day deserves to be observed even if it isn't celebrated. Columbus is so important, he says. The historical changes that stem from European reach in the Americas are just incalculably large. So was Columbus someone who should be celebrated? 525 years after he set sail, Americans are grappling with that question. Columbus's voyages. Born in the Italian city of Genoa, Columbus was a man of great ambition, and in 1492 he persuaded Spain's king and queen to fund a journey to what Europeans called the Indies, China, Japan, and India. Columbus was convinced by ancient writings of travelers that those lands held great treasures of gold, silver, silk, and spices. At the time, Europeans' contact with Asia was rare because getting there was so difficult. The trip by ship around Africa and Asia over the land routes controlled by hostile armies was long and dangerous. But Columbus proposed a bold new scheme to reach Asia by sailing west to the open sea. Like other people of his time, Columbus didn't know that the two continents would be in his way, so North and South America in regard. So when he landed in the Bahamas on October 12, 1492, after an 11-week journey from Spain, Columbus thought he had reached the Indies. That December, Columbus claimed an island in the Caribbean Sea for Spain, calling it Hispaniola. Today, the island is split into Haiti and the Dominican Republic. The explorer praised the island's people, the Taino, for their generosity, yet he also let his men loot and kidnap the Taino in search of the tribe's riches. Columbus made 3 other journeys to the New World, as Europeans soon began calling the Americas. He never set foot in North America. With each, the Taino suffered. Many were sold into slavery, and countless others died from smallpox and other European diseases to which they had no resistance. Within the decades, most of them had been wiped out. Yet Columbus's voyages transformed the world. European powers rushed to build settlements in the New World, see timeline, and when the native people got their way, scholars say, the newcomers pushed them aside. Later, after the U.S. was founded and began expanding west across the continent, Congress repeatedly forced treaties on Native Americans that stripped them of their ancestral homelands. America was built on lands which Indians were essentially forbidden to keep, says Ron Welburn, a professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Benjamin Rennan, a professor at Fitchburg State University in Massachusetts, traces this treatment directly to Columbus. Columbus saw this place as open and available for European possession, and U.S. settlers merely continued his treatment, he says. Still, many Americans continue to admire Columbus. In particular, Italian Americans take pride in the explorer, holding Columbus Day parades in New York and in other cities. Historical accident. In his search for the Indies in 1492, Columbus was off by 9,000 miles. And this map here, if you could take a closer look, pretty much conveys the essence of the realities of Columbus's journey. Celebrating diversity. So historian William Connell at Seton Hall University in New Jersey views Columbus Day as a tribute to an important American trait, diversity. That was an explicit goal of Benjamin Harrison, who in 1892 became the first president to proclaim a celebration of Columbus. At the time, Italian immigrants were near the bottom rung in American society. So Connell was written, Harrison intended Columbus Day to celebrate our land and its many peoples. Columbus was definitely not a saint, Connell says, yet Connell believes it's wrong to blame the explorer for every crime that came after his arrival. In his view, Columbus's achievement is undeniable. His linking of the New World and the Old World was a world-changing occasion, such has rarely happened in human history. Native Americans today. So today, experts agree that Native Americans are suffering, according to 2014 figures from the U.S. Census Bureau. 28% live in poverty, the highest of any racial group. The overall U.S. poverty rate, by the way, is about 14%. Railton believes much of this on the bleak conditions on Indian reservations. These areas were created by the U.S. government starting in the 19th century for American Indians forced off their lands. Railton says that the reservations have kept Native Americans isolated from other Americans, many of whom see Indians as part of a tragic past. Confronting the present reality, and its connection to the treatment of Native Americans since Europeans arrived in the New World is behind a push to establish Indigenous Peoples Day. But should Columbus Day be eliminated completely in the process? Not everyone who backs Indigenous Peoples Day thinks so. In Railton's ideal world, Americans would address a difficult past by holding celebrations of both Columbus and Indigenous peoples. These back-to-back days could allow us to think in depth about the European and Native American threads throughout the history of the Americas, he says. Connell has come to a similar conclusion. The Columbus discussion is a good thing, he writes. It reminds us and our students that history is messy. It's absolutely necessary to have these discussions to celebrate the good that has come out of Columbus, while also pondering the bad. So, as you guys can see, these types of dates, if you will, show us and tell us the way that Columbus and the Native American experience has transgressed. Here are some key dates from Columbus to the U.S. In 1492, Columbus in the Americas. As European powers seek to expand their empire, Spain funds Christopher Columbus' search for the Indies. He accidentally finds the Americas instead, and initiates Spanish colonization of the area. In 1513, we have Ponce de Leon. The Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon claims Florida for Spain, and 6 years later, Hernán Cortés lands in Mexico, eventually conquering the Aztec Empire. Finally, in 1607, we have Jamestown, where about 100 English men and boys arrive in North America to start the first permanent English settlement in the New World, soon named Jamestown, Virginia, after King James I. In 1609, we have Henry Hudson. When the Dutch East India Company sends Henry Hudson to find an easterly path to Asia, he winds up in the Americas, setting up the stage for Dutch colonization of New Amsterdam, which is today New York. And in 1620, we have the Mayflower. The first English Puritans, about 100, arrive in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The first winter is grueling, with half the settlers dying of cold and starvation, but the survivors eventually thrive, and by 1732, Britain has 13 colonies on the East Coast. In 1682, France claims Louisiana. More than a century after France begins exploring the Americas, it claims the Louisiana area for itself, adding to its territories in parts of Florida and Canada. In the 1760s, we see British dominance, and following a series of wars, treaties, and land swaps, the British gain control of the Dutch, Spanish, and French territories east of the Mississippi River. Finally, in 1776, we have the United States, where the 13 colonies declared their independence and formed the United States. They defeated the British in the Revolutionary War. So although many of you are familiar with these dates, I think what the reading is trying to show us here is that these dates in many ways have impacted the Native American population and culture in ways that we sometimes just don't learn. So the fact is that Columbus Day and its legacy, or Indigenous Peoples Day and its contemporary take, give us a new perspective on the way that culture maybe should be observed. Please go ahead and answer those key concept questions, and remember to use these thematic talking points for the inquiry survey at the bottom of the lesson. Thank you very much for tuning in.